Welcome to my channel. Today, we're exploring Stellar Defiance, a sci-fi journey where humanity stands strong and defies the odds across the galaxy. Dive into epic starship battles, powerful tech, and the resilience that makes us unstoppable in a universe full of challenges. If you're ready for a thrill-packed adventure in deep space, hit subscribe, and let's get started. The years following the establishment of the Interspecies Court brought both triumph and challenge. Humanity's strong sense of justice had led to the creation of a system where fairness and the impartial application of law were the driving forces, but it was not without its growing pains. As the Interspecies Court expanded, its decisions became increasingly complex, and its impact grew beyond what anyone could have predicted. What had started as a mere idea of the creation of a universal court to ensure that the law would apply equally to all sentient species had blossomed into a powerful force for peace and change throughout the galaxy. But as with any institution that wields significant power, the Interspecies Court also found itself at the center of many political struggles, moral dilemmas, and ideological divides. One of the most pressing challenges humanity faced was the growing tension between species that had not yet fully embraced the principles of universal justice. While many had seen the benefits of the court's impartiality, there were still those who viewed it as a threat to their long-held beliefs. The Garathians, for instance, had once been one of the most formidable adversaries to the court, but they had, after much resistance, come to accept its authority. However, their compliance had not been without resentment. Beneath the surface, the Garathian elites still chafed at the idea that they could no longer impose their will without consequences. They had long been accustomed to settling disputes through sheer military might, and the idea that they were bound by the same rules as weaker species felt like a loss of power. Yet, even as they grudgingly obeyed the court's rulings, they continued to manipulate the legal system in subtle ways, attempting to influence decisions or drag out cases to delay justice. Humanity, aware of these covert efforts, worked tirelessly to ensure the integrity of the court. They were constantly refining the system, ensuring that no species, no matter how powerful, could undermine the core principles of fairness and transparency. The addition of independent monitors, chosen from species with no vested interests in the outcome of trials, became a crucial safeguard against manipulation. These monitors had the authority to oversee the court's proceedings, ensuring that all rules were followed and that no outside influences could sway the verdict. It was a measure that many species resisted, seeing it as a challenge to their autonomy. But over time, it became clear that the independence of these monitors was essential to maintaining the court's credibility and integrity. One of the most difficult cases to date came when the court was asked to mediate a dispute between two neighboring star systems, the Solarians and the Vothari. The Solarians, a species of highly intelligent and technologically advanced beings, had been engaged in a decades-long conflict with the Vothari, a species that had once been their allies but had diverged from the Solarians' cultural and political ideals. Over time, the Solarians had grown increasingly authoritarian, pushing their vision of progress onto the Vothari, who resisted. Tensions had escalated to the point of open conflict, with the Vothari accusing the Solarians of genocide, while the Solarians accused the Vothari of undermining galactic peace. The case was complex, as both sides presented evidence of atrocities committed by the other. The Solarians argued that their actions were justified, claiming they were safeguarding the greater good of the galaxy from the primitive Vothari. The Vothari, on the other hand, argued that they had been subjected to years of oppression and that the Solarians' actions were nothing short of colonization. The case posed a moral and legal dilemma for the court. How could they fairly adjudicate between two sides that had both committed atrocities, each claiming to have been acting in self-defense? Humanity, with their deep understanding of moral complexity and historical precedent, took the lead in guiding the court through this difficult trial. They acknowledged that the case was not a simple matter of one side being right and the other wrong. Instead, it was a case where both sides had been harmed by the conflict, and both sides needed to be held accountable for their actions. The court, under humanity's guidance, sought a middle ground, a resolution that would not only address the immediate conflict, but also work toward healing the long-standing wounds between the two species. The verdict was unprecedented. The court ruled that both the Solarians and the Vothari were responsible for the escalation of the conflict and ordered reparations to be paid by both parties. However, the ruling also included provisions for the establishment of a new peace agreement, with a focus on creating joint governance over the disputed regions. The Solarians were required to dismantle their authoritarian systems and engage in a process of democratization, while the Vothari were encouraged to reintegrate into the galactic political system, ensuring that their voices were heard. The judgment was a carefully crafted compromise, one that sought to heal old wounds while holding both parties accountable. This decision sent shockwaves throughout the galaxy. It was the first time the court had ruled that both parties in a conflict were equally responsible for the escalation of violence. It was a bold step, one that defied the conventional wisdom that saw conflicts as being inherently the fault of one side or the other. But the court's ruling was a triumph for humanity's vision of justice. It proved that the court was not merely a tool for resolving disputes, it was a force for moral clarity in a galaxy where right and wrong were often clouded by cultural biases and historical grudges. Despite this victory, the Interspecies Court continued to face significant challenges. As the court grew in prominence, so too did the number of species and factions that sought to manipulate it for their own purposes. Some species, feeling threatened by the court's influence, sought to undermine its authority by planting misinformation or organizing resistance movements. These factions claimed that the court, led by humanity, was imposing a human-centric worldview on the galaxy, one that disregarded the traditions and values of other species. Such criticisms were not without merit. Humanity's model of justice was rooted in their own cultural values, and it was inevitable that these values would shape the way they viewed the law. However, humanity's commitment to fairness and impartiality allowed them to take these criticisms in stride, recognizing that no system of justice was perfect and that they would need to continually adapt to the needs of the galaxy. Humanity's leadership in the court was also scrutinized by those who had grown distrustful of their growing influence. The Garathians, for example, began to openly question humanity's role as the moral authority of the court. They argued that humanity, having come from a planet with a history of war and strife, was in no position to dictate the rules of galactic justice. To the Garathians, humanity's history was filled with violence, and they could not reconcile how a species with such a troubled past could now stand as the arbiter of peace and fairness. In response, humanity acknowledged their history, but they pointed out that their very experience with war, conflict, and injustice had given them the perspective and empathy needed to lead the Interspecies Court. They argued that it was precisely because of their painful past that they were uniquely suited to build a system of justice that was truly fair, one that recognized the complexity of conflict and sought to address the underlying causes rather than simply punishing the symptoms. Humanity's commitment to this ideal was unshakable, and their arguments eventually won over many species that had previously been skeptical of their leadership. As the Interspecies Court continued to evolve, it became increasingly clear that its role would not be limited to resolving conflicts. It would also serve as a platform for advancing universal rights and ethics. The court began to hear cases that challenged the very concept of what it meant to be sentient and whether certain species, long considered subservient or non-sapient, deserved legal protections. These cases, many of which involved species that had been enslaved, exploited, or marginalized, forced the court to confront uncomfortable truths about the galaxy's history. One of the most notable cases involved the Kyrics, a species that had long been viewed as little more than a primitive insectoid race, incapable of higher thought. They had been used as laborers, their minds enslaved to the will of other, more advanced species. But new evidence had come to light, evidence that suggested that the Kyrics were not only sentient, but had developed a complex system of language, culture, and social organization that had been suppressed by their captors for centuries. The court was forced to reconsider its previous stance on the Kyrics and other species like them. Should they be granted the same legal rights as other sentient beings? Could they be freed from their decades of enslavement and be integrated into galactic society? The case was a turning point for the court. It became a symbol of the ongoing struggle for equality in the galaxy, an acknowledgement that justice was not simply about enforcing the law, but about recognizing the inherent dignity and worth of every sentient being, no matter their appearance, history, or cultural background. Humanity, with their deep commitment to universal justice, was once again at the forefront of this moral battle. Their understanding of the complexities of conflict and their belief in the possibility of redemption and reconciliation made them the natural leaders of the court in this new chapter of galactic governance. In the years that followed, the Interspecies Court became more than just a legal institution. It became a symbol of hope, unity, and moral progress. Through their unwavering commitment to fairness, humanity had shown the galaxy that justice could transcend species, that empathy could overcome centuries of prejudice, and that a better future was possible for all sentient beings. The court was a living testament to humanity's vision of what the galaxy could become, a place where the rule of law and the principles of fairness, equality, and compassion were not just ideals, but a reality for every species, no matter their size, strength, or history.